The summer of 1870 found Europe in a precarious, tense peace. Since the defeat of Napoleon Bonaparte in 1815, the continent had avoided a major, direct conflict between its great powers. Yet beneath this surface calm, a profound geopolitical shift was brewing. Centered on the rising rivalry between the French Empire of Napoleon III and the ascendant Kingdom of Prussia, led by its masterful minister-president, Otto von Bismarck, France, under the glittering but increasingly fragile Second Empire, viewed itself as the preeminent power on the continent. Its dreams were of renewed glory, of an empire that dictated terms and maintained its cultural and military supremacy. Across the Rhine, Prussia harbored a different, more potent ambition: the unification of the disparate German states into a single, powerful nation under Prussian hegemony. Bismarck, a practitioner of realpolitik, understood that blood and iron, not speeches and treaties, were the true midwives of nations. He had already engineered wars against Denmark and Austria to expel external influence and establish Prussian dominance in northern Germany through the North German Confederation, the final, crucial step binding the independent southern German states of Bavaria, Württemberg, Baden, and Hesse to the Prussian cause required. A common, galvanizing enemy. That enemy, in Bismarck's calculation, was to be France. A war against the traditional adversary would forge German unity in the crucible of battle, creating a new empire born not from liberal revolution, as in 1848, but from the will of princes and the point of a bayonet. For their part, Napoleon III and his influential wife, Empress Eugenie, saw, in Prussia's rise, an intolerable threat to French prestige and security. A Germany united under Prussian leadership would permanently alter the balance of power, encircling France and ending its continental dominance. Both courts contained powerful war parties eager for a confrontation. In Paris, Foreign Minister, the Duc de Gramont, and the Empress herself believed a swift, victorious war would shore up the Bonapartist regime, bolster the dynasty for their son, the Prince Imperial, and halt the Prussian juggernaut. All that was needed was a suitable pretext, a spark to ignite the powder keg. As fate would have it, that spark would be struck, not on the banks of the Rhine, but in the simmering political crisis of a seemingly unrelated nation, Spain. The Spanish throne had been vacant since the deposition of Queen Isabella II in 1868. After extensive deliberation, the Spanish government offered the crown to Prince Leopold of Hohenzollern, a distant Catholic relative of King Wilhelm I of Prussia. Leopold was not a Prussian official, and he initially declined. Bismarck, however, recognized the immense strategic and symbolic value of placing a Hohenzollern on a throne bordering France. He quietly maneuvered, and after renewed offers, Leopold accepted. When news of this Hohenzollern candidacy broke in Paris on July 3, 1870, it exploded like a Spanish bomb. The French government and public perceived it as a brazen Prussian attempt to encircle France, potentially placing it between a German-dominated north and a German-influenced south. Gramont saw an opportunity for a diplomatic triumph or a justified war. In a fiery speech to the Corps Legislatif, he declared France would not suffer a foreign power disturbing the European equilibrium to its detriment, placing the interests and the honor of France in danger. The French ambassador, Count Vincent Benedetti, was dispatched to the Prussian king's holiday retreat at Bad Ems. His initial demand that Prussia pressure Leopold to withdraw his acceptance was reluctantly met. King Wilhelm, who personally desired peace, secured Leopold's father to renounce the candidacy on his son's behalf. But Gramont, emboldened and seeking total humiliation, instructed Benedetti to demand a guarantee that no Hohenzollern would ever seek the Spanish throne again. On July 13, in a breach of Spa-Town protocol, Benedetti approached the king on the promenade to press this perpetual guarantee. King Wilhelm, courteous but firm, refused this encroachment on his familial prerogatives and terminated the audience. He later sent a telegram to Bismarck in Berlin detailing the encounter, an account known as the EMS dispatch. In Bismarck's hands, this routine diplomatic communication became the instrument of war. By deftly editing the telegram, condensing it, and sharpening its language to make the exchange seem more brusque and dismissive, he created the impression that the French ambassador had been insulted and the king had refused further contact. When this doctored version was released to the press in European capitals on July 14, France's national holiday, it achieved exactly the effect Bismarck intended. In Paris, it was received as a national insult. The press bayed for blood. Crowds filled the streets chanting to Berlin, and despite last-minute hesitation from Napoleon III, the war party led by Empress Eugenie and Minister of War Edmond Leboeuf carried the day. On July 19, 1870, France declared war on Prussia. Bismarck had his cause. France had its casus belli. The stage was set for a conflict that would shatter empires, forge a new nation, and redraw the map of Europe. The Franco-Prussian War erupted into a Europe unprepared for the scale, speed, and industrialized brutality it would unleash. In the opening weeks, the conflict revealed itself as a stark clash between two very different military systems and national On paper, France possessed a professional, long-service army, renowned for its elan and equipped with what was arguably the world's finest infantry rifle, the chassepot. This breech-loading weapon had a longer range, greater accuracy, and a higher rate of fire than the Prussian infantry's standard-issue Dreyse needle gun. Many French commanders and politicians, supremely confident, believed this technical edge, coupled with the army's legendary fighting spirit, would deliver a quick, victorious campaign, perhaps even a march on Berlin. This optimism was captured by War Minister Leboeuf's infamous boast that the army was ready down to the last gaiter button. Reality proved catastrophically different. French mobilization was a masterpiece of chaos, plagued by corruption, inept administration, and a critical lack of preparation. Vital supply depots were empty, units were rushed to the front, under strength and ill-equipped, and command was paralyzed by the indecisive presence of the ailing Emperor Napoleon III at headquarters. The grand strategic plan, a swift offensive into German territory, collapsed almost immediately due to logistical disarray and command confusion. In stark contrast, the Prussian-led German forces executed a mobilization that was a triumph of meticulous planning and organizational genius. The Prussian General Staff, under the brilliant Chief Helmuth von Moltke, had for years refined a system based on detailed timetables utilizing Germany's extensive railway network to move hundreds of thousands of men and their material with clockwork precision. While the French stumbled, 3 German armies over 400,000 strong converged, with terrifying efficiency on the Franco-German border. Beyond Prussia's core, the southern German states, bound by defensive treaties, honored their alliances. Bavarians, Württembergers, Badners, and Hessians marched alongside their northern cousins. Their initial reservations often overcome by a surge of German nationalist sentiment and a shared perception of French aggression. This was the brotherhood in arms Bismarck had envisioned. The German military system, built on universal conscription, which created a vast reserve of trained manpower and mission-oriented command. Off-tracks tactic proved vastly superior to the French model. Furthermore, the Germans held a decisive advantage in artillery. The Prussian Krupp C-67 steel, breech-loading field guns dramatically outranged, outpowered, and outshot the French bronze, muzzle-loading cannons. This combination of organizational excellence, numerical superiority, and artillery dominance would define the early campaigns. The first major clashes in early August 1870 demonstrated these asymmetries with brutal clarity. At Wissembourg, August 4th, and Vorboxpitchen, August 6th. German forces attacked French positions entrenched on high ground. The battles were bloody and hard-fought, showcasing the lethal power of the chassepot as German infantry suffered heavy casualties assaulting uphill. Yet German discipline, numbers, and relentless pressure told. The French, though often fighting tenaciously in defense, were outfought and outmaneuvered. Most damagingly, a critical failure in French command and control became evident: a lack of coordination between field armies. At the crucial battles of Worth and Spitzer, an entire French corps sat idle within marching distance, unaware or unwilling to support their embattled comrades due to confused orders and an absence of initiative. The twin defeats shattered French offensive plans and forced a general retreat. The road into France was now open. The German armies, sensing weakness, transitioned from a defensive posture to a relentless, invasive advance. The war was about to be carried onto French soil, initiating a series of engagements around the fortress city of Metz that would decide the fate of Napoleon III's primary field force, the Army of the Rhine. The late summer of 1870 witnessed the swift and catastrophic collapse of French imperial military power in a trilogy of battles around Metz that culminated in the war's most decisive encounter at Sedan. Following the August defeats, Marshal François Bazain's Army of the Rhine, with the indecisive Emperor Napoleon III in tow, fell back toward the fortress of Metz. Bazaine, a competent but cautious commander, hoped to use the city's formidable defenses as an anchor while possibly linking up with Marshal Patrice de MacMahon's forces forming to the north. The German High Command, however, moved with relentless speed to prevent this consolidation. In the battles of Borny-Colombey, August 14th, Mars-la-Tour, August 16th, and most crucially, Grevalites-Private, August 18th, the German armies sought to cut off Bazaine's retreat and destroy his army before it could reach safety or unite with MacMahon. The fighting was some of the most intense of the 19th century, characterized by horrific casualties as German infantry, often from the elite Prussian Guard, mounted desperate frontal assaults against French positions fortified on ridges and in villages. At Grevalites-Private, this tactic reached a tragic apex. Miscommunication and impatience led to an ill-prepared attack by the Prussian Guard on the fortified village of St. Privat. Advancing across open ground without adequate artillery support, they were mowed down by chassepot and mitrailleurs and early machine gun fire. The Guard suffered nearly 8,000 casualties in a matter of hours, a shocking loss that horrified observers. Yet, through sheer weight of numbers, flanking movements, and superior artillery, the Germans eventually prevailed. The French, though inflicting disproportionate losses, were forced to withdraw entirely into the Metz fortress. Bazaine's 180,000-man army was now trapped, besieged by a larger German force. Its fate was effectively sealed, though the siege would drag on for months, sapping German resources and French morale. With Bazaine immobilized, German strategy turned to the destruction of France's last major field army, MacMahon's Army of Chalons, under intense political pressure from a panicked Paris government, especially Empress Eugénie, who feared the fall of the dynasty if Bazaine were lost. MacMahon was ordered to relieve Metz. Against his better judgment, he marched his army, accompanied by Napoleon III, on a wide northeastern arc to aid the German Third Army, under Crown Prince Friedrich Wilhelm, and the newly formed Army of the Meuse, under Crown Prince Albert of Saxony, moved with superior speed and intelligence to intercept him. In a series of maneuvering battles at Beaumont and Nouart, they harried the French and forced MacMahon's exhausted, demoralized troops into a defensive pocket around the old frontier fortress town of Sedan. Nestled in a deep valley along the Meuse River, on September 1, 1870, the Germans completed from the surrounding heights. Over 500 German guns looked down upon the trapped French army in what one observer called a chamber pot. What followed was less a battle than a systematic annihilation. German artillery rained shells onto the densely packed French formations with devastating effect. French attempts to break out, including heroic but futile cavalry charges, were crushed. By early afternoon, the situation was hopeless. To avoid further slaughter, Napoleon III himself ordered the white flag raised. The following day, September 2, the emperor surrendered personally to King Wilhelm I. Over 100,000 French soldiers, thousands of horses, and a mountain of equipment fell into German hands. The Battle of Sedan was not just a military defeat, it was the political and symbolic death knell of the Second French Empire. The news, when it reached Paris, ignited a revolutionary firestorm. On September 4, crowds stormed the parliament, and Republican deputies proclaimed the end of the empire and the birth of the government of national defense, a new French republic. The imperial war for dynastic glory was over. In its place began a republican war for national survival, a far more desperate, bitter, and total conflict. The fall of the Second Empire at Sedan and the proclamation of the French Third Republic transformed the Franco-Prussian War from a conventional cabinet war between monarchs into a modern, national, and increasingly brutal struggle. The new government of national defense, led by General Louis-Jules Trochu as president, and dominated by the fiery patriot Léon Gambetta as Minister of the Interior, faced a seemingly impossible task. The professional French army had effectively been destroyed or captured at Metz and Sedan. Paris itself, fortified with massive walls and a ring of detached forts, was now directly threatened, and by September 19 it was completely encircled by the German armies, beginning a grueling 4-month siege. Yet the Republic refused to surrender. Gambetta, in a legendary escape from besieged Paris by balloon, established a provisional capital in Tours, later Bordeaux, and embarked on a frantic mission to raise new armies from the provinces, channeling the spirit of the 1793 levy en masse. He called for a people's war, mobilizing all of France's human and material resources. New armies were conjured from conscripts, reserves, and irregular francs-tireurs, free-shooters. These forces, however, were often poorly trained, poorly equipped, sometimes with outdated muzzleloaders imported from America, and led by inexperienced officers. Their spirit could not compensate for the professionalism lost at Sedan. The German High Command, meanwhile, was divided on how to end the war, with the French government refusing to negotiate territorial concessions, specifically the cession of Alsace and part of Lorraine. A simple peace was impossible. Some, like Bismarck, pressed for the bombardment of Paris to break civilian morale and force a surrender. Others, like Crown Prince Friedrich Wilhelm and General von Moltke, opposed this on humanitarian and practical grounds, favoring a strategy of starvation. While the debate raged at German headquarters in Versailles, the war spread and intensified across the French countryside. German logistical lines, stretching deep into France, became vulnerable to guerrilla attacks by Franks. The German response was swift and severe, informed by a legal view that considered irregulars operating without uniforms as illegitimate combatants. Villages suspected of harboring francs-tireurs were fined, looted, or burned. Captured irregulars were often summarily executed. This cycle of ambush and reprisal brutalized the conflict, sowing deep bitterness and trauma that would poison Franco-German relations for generations. It was a foretaste of the total warfare of the 20th century. Militarily, Gambetta's improvised armies, though large on paper, met with relentless defeat in the field. The German forces, now veterans and operating on interior lines, systematically dismantled each new French formation. At Orleans, Le Mans, and in the east, around Beaune and Dijon, French armies under commanders like Aurel de Denys Chauncey and Bourbaki were outmaneuvered and out. The climactic failure came in the east in January 1871. General Bourbaki's Army of the East, attempting to relieve the besieged fortress of Belfort, was checked at the Battle of the Seine, and then, harried by German forces, forced to flee across the border into neutral Switzerland, where 87,000 men were disarmed and interned a humiliating end. Back in Paris, the siege took a grim toll. As winter set in, food and fuel supplies dwindled. Parisians were reduced to eating rats, zoo animals, and bread made from straw and bone meal. Disease spread, and mortality soared. Finally, after 135 days, with all hope of relief extinguished and facing starvation, the Parisian government agreed to an armistice on January 28, 1871. The war, for all practical purposes, was over. France had been utterly defeated in the field. Yet, even in defeat, the seeds of future conflict were sown. The French refusal to accept the permanence of their territorial losses, the lost provinces of Alsace-Lorraine, created a festering wound of revangism that would become a central driver of European politics for the next 4 decades. While French armies met defeat after defeat, the war achieved Bismarck's primary political objective: the unification of Germany. The shared struggle against France, hailed as a defensive war against foreign aggression, acted as a powerful catalyst, melting away decades of suspicion between the Protestant North and Catholic South. From the war's outset, Bismarck worked assiduously to translate military alliance into political union. Through a complex series of negotiations throughout the autumn of 1870, he secured the agreement of the southern German states Bavaria, Württemberg, Baden, and Hesse to join a new, expanded German federation. Key to this was granting special concessions, or reserved rights, particularly to Bavaria, allowing it to retain certain sovereign privileges, like its own postal service and peacetime control of its army. On January 1, 1871, the new German Empire, Deutsches Reich, officially came into existence, though its public proclamation was saved for a moment of supreme symbolism. That moment came on January 18, 1871, in the Hall of Mirrors at the Palace of Versailles. The choice of location was profoundly deliberate. Versailles was the ultimate symbol of French absolutist power and grandeur under Louis XIV, and it was from here that German princes and armies had been humiliated for centuries. Now, in the heart of defeated France, the German Empire was born. In a ceremony of calculated pomp, King Wilhelm I of Prussia was proclaimed German Emperor Deutscher Kaiser. The proclamation was read by the Grand Duke of Baden, and the assembled German princes, generals, and officers roared their approval. The painter, Anton von Werner, immortalized the scene, capturing the solemn, triumphant, and slightly awkward moment when centuries of German division were formally ended. Bismarck, the architect, stood to the side, his life's work complete. The new empire was a federal state, a lesser Germany Kleindeutschland, that excluded Austria, and it was unequivocally dominated by Prussia, which controlled its foreign policy, military command, and its chancellor. This unification from above, achieved through monarchical fiat and military victory, created a powerful authoritarian state that would dominate Central Europe. The victory over France provided the new Reich with immense prestige, a massive war, indemnity of 5 billion francs, and the annexed territories of Alsace and most of Lorraine. However, it also created a deep-seated enmity with France and instilled in Germany a dangerous faith in military solutions to political problems, a faith encapsulated in Bismarck's own phrase, blood and iron. The peace was formalized in the Treaty of Frankfurt on May 10, 1871. Europe now had a new, powerful nation at its heart, but the manner of its birth ensured the peace would be an armed and uneasy one. The formal end of the Franco-Prussian War in May 1871 did not bring peace to France. Instead, it unleashed a violent civil war that revealed the deep social and political fractures within the nation. The government of national defense, having surrendered to Germany, had lost much of its legitimacy in the eyes of many Parisians. The capital's population, which had endured a horrific siege, was exhausted, radicalized, and deeply resentful of the conservative, rural-dominated National Assembly that now met in Versailles and seemed eager to restore a monarchical order. Tensions exploded on March 18, 1871. When government troops tried to seize cannons belonging to the Paris National Guard, a citizen militia that had become the stronghold of radical Republican and socialist sentiment. The attempt failed, the troops fraternized with the crowd, and 2 generals were captured and executed. The government, under Adolphe Thiers, fled to Versailles, and Paris found itself in the hands of a revolutionary commune. The Paris Commune, which lasted for 72 days, was a complex and chaotic experiment in direct democracy and social revolution. Its supporters, a coalition of radical Republicans, socialists, anarchists, and ordinary workers, saw it as a fight to preserve the Republic against reaction and to create a more just, decentralized society. They passed progressive reforms separating church and state, canceling rent debts, and promoting workers' cooperatives. To the Versailles government and the propertied classes of France, however, the Commune was an apocalyptic outbreak of criminal anarchy, a direct threat to social order, property, and the very idea of the nation. The German army, still stationed around Paris, observing the armistice terms, watched impassively as Frenchmen turned against Frenchmen. In late May, Thiers regrouped. Versailles army, now reinforced by released prisoners of war from Germany, launched a brutal assault on Paris to crush the Commune. What followed was bloody week. Le Samen Kelny, Street-by-street fighting was ferocious, and the communards, in a final act of defiance, set fire to major landmarks, including the Tuileries Palace and the Hôtel de Ville. The Versailles troops, exacting a terrible vengeance, executed tens of thousands of suspected communards, men, women, and children, in summary killings and mass shootings. The violence was indiscriminate and cathartic, a settling of scores not just with the rebels but with the radical spirit of Paris itself. When the smoke cleared, Paris was scarred by ruins and by memory. The Communist defeat cemented the control of a conservative Republican regime, the Republic of the Dukes, that would dominate France for a generation. But it also created a lasting myth on the left of martyrdom and revolutionary promise. The trauma of the Civil War, layered upon the humiliation of defeat by Germany, left France psychologically and politically divided. Thus, the Franco-Prussian War concluded not with a single peace, but with two starkly different legacies. For Germany, a triumphant unification and the dawn of a powerful empire. For France, a devastating national defeat, a bitter territorial amputation, and a self-inflicted civil war, whose wounds would take decades to heal. The War of 1872-71 did not resolve the German question or satisfy French pride. It merely set the stage for the greater, more terrible, European catastrophes of the century to come.